Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar on using Twitter as a tool for advocacy. My name is Monica Bryant and I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Triage Cancer. My co-presenter today is Josh Fernandez, Digital Media Specialist at Living Beyond Breast Cancer. This joint webinar was imagined because in our various discussions about advocacy and using social media, we've gotten lots of questions about how exactly to use Twitter. So our goal today with this webinar is really to demystify this tool by going through the basics and then giving you some concrete examples of how Twitter can be a great tool for advocacy. Now, before we get into the heart of the topic today, I just need to go over some quick housekeeping items. All of the callers are going to be muted for the duration of the webinar today, but if you have any questions or technical problems, please feel free to type them in the chat box to the side of your screen. This webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing on our website, triagecancer.org. At the end of the webinar, you're going to be redirected to a quick survey. Please take a few moments to fill it out and let us know what you think. We really value your feedback, and your feedback will help drive modifications as we present this in the future. So quickly, Triage Cancer is a national nonprofit organization that provides education and resources on the entire continuum of cancer survivorship issues. We provide this to survivors, patients, caregivers, and healthcare professionals. We host a speaker bureau of experts and survivors available to anybody who's hosting an educational event, and you can just request a speaker on our website at triagecancer.org. We also host an educational blog, provide online resources, and participate in seminars and webinars all over the country. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Josh.
Hi everyone, my name is Josh Fernandez, Living Beyond Breast Cancer's Digital Media Specialist. So to tell you a little bit about LBBC, we provide trusted breast cancer information and a community of support online, in print, by phone, and in person. This includes video, audio, and other content from our website, lbbc.org, our quarterly newsletters and publications from our Guide to Understanding Breast Cancer series, our Metastatic Breast Cancer series, and our new series for targeted populations, Breast Cancer in Focus. We also offer support via our toll-free breast cancer helpline at 888-753-5222. We also provide information and support via our webinars and Twitter chats covering a variety of topics from treatment to the emotional impact of breast cancer. We also offer in-person programs and educational opportunities via our community meetings and live web stream panel discussions. LBBC assists people at all stages of diagnosis, treatment, and recovery. We work with the nation's top experts to offer programs and resources that can address a variety of your concerns, such as those pertaining to medical, psychosocial, emotional, legal, and financial impacts of the disease.
Now, our guess is that you wouldn't be on this call today if you didn't already engage in some sort of advocacy efforts on a daily basis. But to ensure that we're all on the same page, I want to quickly talk about the spectrum of advocacy. And there are various kinds of advocacy that you can engage in, and it's not necessarily linear. So you may be doing all or some of these already, and you may be doing them at different levels as well. So the different kinds of advocacy we're talking about include personal advocacy, and this is where you're advocating for yourself. So maybe you got a second opinion, or you worked out a reasonable accommodation with an employer. Just being on this call and learning more about how to be an effective advocate is a great example of personal advocacy. Then there's community advocacy, where you're advocating for others on a personal level for you or your community. So maybe you spoke at an event, or helped a friend through their diagnosis, or conducted a community outreach and education event. There's organizational advocacy, and this is when you're advocating specifically for an organization. So maybe you're a volunteer with LBBC, or maybe you've told other people about Triage Cancer and their services. That would all be organizational advocacy. Media advocacy is exactly what it sounds like. It's advocating through the media. So often people are intimidated by the idea of the media, and it can be a little scary maybe to go on camera and give an interview. But if you've ever even posted information about a cause or an organization on Facebook, you've engaged in a level of media advocacy. Maybe you've written a blog, an article, or a letter to the editor. Those are all examples. Then there's scientific advocacy. And you might be wondering how this could be possible, but maybe you even just sent out a Facebook or a message or a tweet about saying that we should raise more money for cancer research funding. That is an example of a very easy way to engage in scientific advocacy. Then there's policy. And this is where you're advocating for a new or changed policy. It might be that you've met with a federal elected official about a specific policy. Maybe you've signed a change.org, just blanked on the word, I apologize. You said, I support the idea that we aren't going to change the guidelines for breast cancer screening. That would be an example of policy advocacy. And then finally, there's legislative advocacy. And this is where you're advocating for new or changed specific legislation or propositions. And we're going to give you an example of that later on. But Twitter can be used in all of these instances of advocacy. And we're going to get into the details of how you can do that. But just kind of keep all of these different parts in mind as we talk. And you might be wondering why we're suggesting that Twitter is such an effective tool for advocacy. Well, first and foremost, Twitter enables us to have a very wide reach quickly. There are an estimated 232 million Twitter users worldwide. And now that doesn't mean that your tweet is going to be seen by all of these people, but it does have more potential to be seen when you compare it with other forms of social media, just by virtue of how Twitter operates. For example, your posts on Facebook are likely only going to be seen by your friends and maybe your friends' friends. But with Twitter, your tweets are published for the world to see. Now, there are pros and cons to that, but we're going to talk about how you can use Twitter effectively, whether or not you're being public about your cancer diagnosis. Secondly, Twitter can have an immediate impact. So Twitter moves very quickly. There are updates every second that you can see, and it gives you a timely way to interact with individuals. And then finally, Twitter allows us to reach multiple audience. So if you are a survivor, you could tweet at a healthcare institution that you're not necessarily personally connected to and still have a reach. So Twitter enables us to reach people that aren't necessarily just our friends.
So I'm going to talk about a few of the ways that people use Twitter. The first of which is social influencing. So a Twitter who's a social influencer is someone who posts consistently, which means, once or more a day. The more likely you post, the more likely you are to show up in other users' Twitter feeds. So you're seen more. These users also are very interactive. They respond to people, they retweet, they're sending call to actions, in the instance of advocacy, asking people to sign petitions or support research, for example. Another way people use Twitter is, to gather information and to be a social listener. So, what this means is as a social listener or information consumer, these users are following the trends and news in their fields or in their interests. They know, what the hot topics are in their communities. They use Twitter as sort of a news feed for gathering information and, staying up to date on the causes they care about and, the major players involved. Another way to use it is to combine both of these different aspects, a sort of hybrid of being a social influencer and a social listener. So that means, not only using Twitter to gather information, but to respond to the information that you're seeing, retweeting influencers or commenting while you're retweeting. And I'll get to retweeting in a moment. We'll tell you more about that a little bit later. It's also, making sure that when you keep up with the trends, that you're also commenting on them and showing people your insights or opinions. Next, we're going to talk about setting up your account. So now that we've talked about the ways to use Twitter and the importance of using Twitter, we're going to show you a quick demonstration of sort of what Twitter looks like when you're signing in and how to set up your account. Okay, so this is what Twitter looks like when you are either signing up or about to log in. When you sign up, it's going to ask you to fill out a little bit of information through a few different fields, such as your email and what kind of username you want. We'll tell you a little bit more about usernames in a minute, but just so you can see what a Twitter profile looks like if it's new to you. When you log into Twitter, this is what a timeline looks like on Twitter. This is what your feed looks like. It'll show you your tweets, your following, your followers. In the middle, and taking up most of the screen, the latest tweets. The option to add a tweet, which we'll talk more about in a moment. And in the top right corner, being able to look at your profile. If you click on this icon, which is the profile picture for LBBC, a drop-down menu comes up and you have the option of viewing your profile. When you get started on Twitter, your profile is blank. It's the typical theme colors that Twitter uses. They're blue. You can customize and change a lot of this information, including your username, your profile, and your location and your banner image by editing your profile. When you click Edit Profile, you can change your name. So if we didn't want to be Living or LBBC, we could be. Note that there is a character limit, so as a result, we'll just keep LBBC. You can update your profile. You can tell people a little bit about yourself. If you have a website or blog you want to share, you can include that here as well as your location. You can also change your theme color. You can change it to any one of these colors, or you can add a custom hex code if you know a color that you really like. The other way to access settings, clicking on the icon in the top right corner again, go to Settings. This is how you can change your username, your email address, your security and privacy settings, your password, and your notifications. Here you can also find friends if you would like to using your email. Now that we've gone over the back end of Twitter, we're going to talk a little bit about account details, things that you should consider. So before you create your account, there are some things that you're going to want to figure out. The first and foremost is your Twitter handle. All Twitter accounts, their Twitter usernames start with the @ sign. So, some people will use their full name, for example, @Josh Fernandez, if that were my Twitter username. But if you don't necessarily want your name to be connected with your Twitter account or what you may be tweeting, you may want to come up with an alias. An example of this is Monica's Twitter handle, which is @NavSurvivorship. I'm going to show you some of this information in just a moment. So, for example, my username is just an abbreviated version of my full name. And here's Monica's. Again, she's not using Monica Bryant. It's NAV survivorship. You'll notice that we both chose our own photos for our profile pictures. If you don't want to use your personal photo, again, is another way to protect your privacy. You can do what a lot of organizations like LBBC and Triage Cancer do. We used a logo. You can use an image of a flower, an icon that you really like, something that you feel represents you, but that also allows you to use a Twitter account without having to show your picture, if that's what you prefer. Keep in mind that whether or not you show your picture, it's another way of showing how out there you want to be. Your profile details is another area where you should decide whether or not there are details that you'd like to include. You don't necessarily have to share all the details of your entire life. A good rule of thumb when you're thinking of social media is don't include anything that you wouldn't want to have posted on the front page of a newspaper like the New York Times. Living Beyond Breast Cancer, it's our mission. Some other people might have some tongue-in-cheek sentence or a quote that they like. Or they may very briefly describe the purpose of of how they're using their Twitter, like if they're tweeting on behalf of people with breast cancer and for breast cancer advocacy. We're going to talk about the way that relationships work on Twitter. So on Facebook, users that follow one another or are connected to one another are called Facebook friends. On Twitter, it's, Twitter followers. Following does not equal friendship. And simply what that means is that, you can follow others even if they do not follow you. Depending on privacy settings, if you follow someone and they're public, but they don't follow you and you're private, they're not going to be able to see your tweets. You'll be able to see theirs. This goes back to how you want to use Twitter. If you want to be an influencer, you're going to want to follow people, as many people as you want that's relevant to your interests. If you want to be a consumer, if you want to be a consumer, you're also going to want to follow people. But it may not be important if they follow you back. And then if you want to be a hybrid, you're going to want to balance the two. You're going to want to follow people that are really important to you in terms of the content they're tweeting and the relationships and the reach that they can help you with in terms of your advocacy and outreach. A good rule of thumb is that if someone follows you, to help you follow them back or decide whether to follow them back, determine, if your interests align. Do you know that person personally? Is that person someone you want to build a relationship with in this Twitter sphere, as it's called? It's basically just etiquette on Twitter. You don't have to follow someone back. If you do, it's nice, and it may benefit you in the long run if it's someone that you're comfortable following. Composing a tweet. Unlike a lot of social media, Twitter has a character limit. The character is 140. That includes spaces and punctuation. So I'll show you what that looks like right now. I'm sorry, when you click this icon, the color will depend on the theme color you chose, but it looks like a quill. This is how you compose a tweet. You click that, and you can type out your tweet. After I compose this tweet, you'll see that this number is now at 22. It means I have 22 characters left. This is how you can sort of keep track of the number of characters that you need to consider when you're typing out a tweet. Consider using word abbreviations, like instead of because, B/C. Instead of with, W and backslash. Instead of typing out the word and, use the ampersand. These are all different kinds of ways that you can save your characters so that you can really get to the meat of the tweet, really not have to worry about losing your messaging. Be creative, see how other users are abbreviating on Twitter. That's the best way to learn. Again, as a consumer, follow people that you think are doing a great job tweeting in the sort of areas of interest you have. See what they're using. What you'll notice is that you also have the option to add a photo, and you can also add a link. When you add a photo or a link, they do take away from your character count as well. But unlike when you type in a single letter or a number and you only lose one character, you lose a few characters when you add a photo or a link. If we were going to upload this photo, it brought our character count from 140 to 117. If we were going to add this link of an upcoming LBDC program, it brings our character count down to 118. This is why abbreviation is especially important, so that you can include relevant information and engaging information like photos, which are really powerful on social media, or links, which you can share on Twitter to get other people to read interesting articles or important things, or share documents like petitions. But also keeping in mind that you need to be creative with the abbreviation. Recently, Twitter made it so that when you add a link, it cuts it off so that it's not taking off a lot of the character count. As you'll notice here, for example, our Ask the Expert isn't showing the full link, but it's still clickable. Sometimes for aesthetic reasons, you may want to consider having your URL shortened, and you can do this by using a URL shortener. So if I were to take this event listing, which is a very long URL, you can go to a URL shortener like bit.ly. You can paste the URL in here, and it shortens it. Again, it's for aesthetics. It's up to you if you want to use a URL shortener, but know that that's an option to you. Another URL shortener you can use is tinyURL. There are a few of them out there, especially if you use social media tools, like, for example, there's one named Hootsuite that has its own URL shortener. Again, they were mostly used when Twitter didn't have the option of cutting the link characters, but now it does. So when you're composing a tweet, the other things that you can do besides adding images or links is tagging or tweeting at someone. Whereas Facebook, you can comment or tag someone in a post. Your tweet is the main method of communication. There's no post for you to comment on Twitter. You tweet at someone. We'll show you how that's done right now. When you click on the tweet button, if you want to start a tweet with someone, you notice as I put the @ symbol and I started typing Triage Cancer's name, a list of Twitter users came up. Make sure that when you're tweeting at someone, you're selecting the right username, or you can fully type it out on your own. The tweet's posted. That's how you can tweet at someone at random without having seen a tweet. Sometimes you're going to want to comment on someone's tweet from a timeline. To do this, you can hit the reply button on the tweet of the person you'd like to tweet back at. Twitter will then automatically populate the tweet box with the usernames of the people you're trying to tweet at. Another thing you can do to tweet at someone or to communicate with them via Twitter is to retweet them, which this is the equivalent of Facebook sharing. You can also favorite the tweet. Or you can retweet it and add a comment. Here you can type something that, says, if you agree with the tweet, if you don't agree with the tweet, if you just think that your followers should follow or read this interesting tweet or information that this user posted, this is how you can do that. In the top left corner, the bell icon for notifications, when you click on that, this is a list of everyone who has favorited, retweeted, or wrote a tweet and used your name in it. This is a good way to keep track of people that you should be responding to and to see how people are communicating with you or about you on Twitter. For example, this tweet right here, Triage Cancer, talking about our webinar that we're producing right now. We have two notifications now. Triage Cancer retweeting our tweet and favoriting. Another name for when someone uses your tweet or your name in a tweet is a mention. So when Triage Cancer tagged us in this tweet or typed our name out and did not start the tweet with our name, that would be called a mention. So this is the way that users interact with each other on Twitter and how it's different than Facebook. Another thing to note, if you go to your profile regarding when you favorite someone's tweet, it acts as a bookmark. So this is a list of all the tweets that we've favorited. So if you really like a tweet, don't hesitate to favorite it, especially if it's something that you want to look at later, or if it has an article or another piece of content, whether it be video or photo that you find interesting. If you want to type in a retweet without doing the retweet button, Twitter etiquette is to use the letters RT. So copying this tweet in the tweet box, pasting, putting letters RT in the beginning of the tweet, this lets you put a small comment before it. So again, where you have to be creative with abbreviations. So say you wanted to shorten someone's tweet so that you could still have a sizable comment without worrying about the character count. Instead of R-tweet, which stands for retweet, by the way, if I didn't mention it, you put M-tweet, which stands for modified retweet. So that would mean that I changed it a bit. So and then if I posted it like that, that would be a modified retweet. So again, retweets when a user shares another tweet or an update, the square arrow that highlights in green. RT and MT are abbreviations for retweet and modified retweet when you edit the tweet with regard to character limit. A major function of Twitter that a lot of other social media have adopted is a hashtag. And basically, a hashtag is a word or phrase that, when it begins with the hash or the pound sign at the beginning, it makes that word or phrase hyperlinked, which means that when you click it, you're sent to a page that is a collection of all the tweets that have used that hashtag. And the main purpose of the hashtag is to organize updates around a particular topic. For example, Twitter chats and events, a conference that you might attend, like LBBC's LBBC Conf 2015, which is the hashtag of, as you see right here, of our conference. When people use the hashtag BCSM, for example, which stands for Breast Cancer Social Media, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. That's a collection of tweets where people have posted about breast cancer information. They've asked questions, and most importantly, the purpose of BCSM, the weekly chat founded by the organizers. If more than one word, no spaces. So, for example, right here, Follow Friday. Below you'll see breast cancer at the bottom. It's all one word. There's no space. When you put a space in between words, the word after the space isn't counted as the part of the hashtag. We included some examples of breast cancer hashtags below. BCSM. Again, this is primarily a hashtag used for Twitter chat, but also used to gather a lot of breast cancer information. A lot of people use this hashtag, on an hourly basis even, to connect with others and to share blog posts, articles, or ask questions, in addition to the Twitter chat that happens every Monday night at 9 p.m. I encourage you all to attend it. We'll talk more about Twitter chats in a bit. We'll show you what a hashtag looks like in real time real quick. So in our tweet, right here, you'll notice that breast cancer, all one word with a pound sign in front of it, is hyperlinked. When you click on it, this is what you'll get on Twitter. The default setting is the top, so the most popular tweets in that moment that use that hashtag. So for example, right here, the CDC is about the BRCA mutations, and for people who are at high risk of getting breast cancer. Some photos, a news story, and some Twitter accounts that use the hashtag. If you want to see hashtag updates in real time, click live right next to the top. As you can see, this one was posted 1 minute ago. One on a melatonin study, it looks like, was posted 2 minutes ago. This is a tab you'll want to use for Twitter chats, which again we'll get to in a moment. So think of hashtags. Think of hashtags as sort of like a library card catalog system. It's a way to group a bunch of different information, in using one tag. If you want to see a lot of information about breast cancer and BCSM is likely to have all the tweets related to breast cancer. If you want to see information about young adults who are diagnosed with cancer, looking at YA Cancer will show you the collection of tweets where young adults with cancer, their advocates, or even providers who tweet will have tweeted information and other messages regarding young adults with cancer. So Twitter chats. So a Twitter chat is an online chat that's threaded using a hashtag. Using BCSM as an example, so BCSM was founded by 3 women, a breast surgeon, Dr. Deanna Atai, Alicia Staley, a woman who was diagnosed with breast cancer, who is also a communications professional and advocate, and Jody Shoger, who also has breast cancer and is also a breast cancer advocate. Every Monday night at 9, they have a Twitter chat on a given topic within breast cancer. It can be something like the emotional impact of breast cancer, survivorship issues, metastatic breast cancer. Twitter chats, whether they're held weekly, monthly, quarterly, they're typically a chat that involves, that's public, that anyone can join using the hashtag, whether they just want to read along, whether they want to get involved and ask questions, or they want to respond to questions. To be a part of the conversation, you join by using the hashtag and following the live thread. It's really important to consider Twitter chats, especially, you can participate from anywhere, from the comfort of your own home. If you're, getting treatment at a treatment center, you can participate there. It's an opportunity to ask or answer questions and share your story, and to also get and provide useful resources. It's also a really great way to network and engage in community. So whereas this webinar might be your starting point for understanding Twitter for breast cancer advocacy, engaging with people on BCSM or Living Beyond Breast Cancer's Twitter chats is a nice way to, connect with others and learn from them, to figure out how you can, get the information you're looking for, whether it's for advocacy or if it's for your own personal use for your help, going through treatment or coping with breast cancer.
So I think Josh has given us a really extensive overview of how to use Twitter, and I hope that you've all found it really helpful, because I know when I started first using Twitter, it was like learning a whole new language and what are these symbols and how am I supposed to do this, and it takes a little while to kind of get used to it all and figure out all the different options. So I think Josh did an amazing job kind of breaking it all down for us. But we did just want to also give you sort of a real-life example of how Twitter can be useful in an advocacy setting. So we're going to go through an example, and this was a tweet that LBDC sent out saying, if hashtag breast cancer guidelines are finalized, millions of women 40 to 49 could lose access to mammograms. And you can see there's another hashtag in the tweet, stop the guidelines, and then there's a link. So if you were following LBDC on Twitter and this came up in your timeline, there's a couple of different options. You could simply read the tweet and sort of think to yourself, that's not good. We would hope that as advocates you would take it one step further and maybe even just click on the link to figure out exactly what they're talking about. And this link would take you to a change.org petition where you could put in your name and address, and a letter would be generated to your elected official about these guidelines. So that's something where you could engage in advocacy in 30 seconds. Another way that you can engage in advocacy is clicking the like button. So as Josh mentioned, that's the star on the bottom of this tweet to show that you liked this tweet and you sort of support what the LBDC is saying. And it will add this tweet to your bookmarks. So if you wanted to sort of follow up on the hashtag stop the guidelines, you could at a later date. The next thing that you might do is click the retweet button, which is that sort of square with arrows again. And that would make this tweet, it would put this tweet inside of your specific followers. So there, you might have followers that have no interest in LBDC or don't know about LBDC or don't follow LBDC. By you retweeting their tweet, you're now expanding the reach of what they sent out. You could click the retweet button and add something of your own. So for example, you could tag somebody who's relevant. So maybe your elected official, if you wanted to talk to them about it, or maybe you want to make sure that your best friend who is really concerned about losing access to mammograms sees this tweet. You could tag them and that would notify them of this tweet. So those are all relatively simple and quick things that you can do to engage in advocacy from a tweet that somebody else sent out. But let's say you want to take it one step further. You can actually use the content that LBDC created and create your own tweet. So let's say that this original tweet interested in you and you wanted to engage in advocacy. So I started to compose a tweet here to my followers. And there's a couple of things here that I want to point out. So my tweet is asking my followers to ask their members of Congress to support the legislation that's mentioned in LBDC's original tweet. So the things that I did correctly here in this tweet, so it says ask your members of Congress to stop new hashtag breast cancer guidelines and support at DWS tweets bill, hashtag stop the guidelines, and then I copied and pasted the same link and I CC'd LBDC. So the couple of things I did right here was I tagged the elected official. So I, from the change.org petition, realized that this was a bill created by Debbie Wasserman Schultz. So I happened to be following her, so it was easy for me just to put an @ and I kind of knew already what her handle was. If you didn't know what your elected official's handle was, there's a couple of ways you could find out. You could search their name in the search box like Josh showed you, or Triage Cancer on our website has a handy list of members of Congress handles, and the link is included at the end of the presentation. So tagging the elected officials is another way to sort of expand the reach of your tweet. I used the same hashtag as the original tweet, so stop the guidelines and hashtag breast cancer, so that keeps the thread alive. So if someone saw my tweet and clicked on stop the guidelines, it would bring up all the other tweets that use that same hashtag. Now, I attempted to CC at LBBC, which was sort of a nod to the fact that LBBC was my original source. And I've included the link so people can find out more information. So those are all the things I kind of did right. The thing that I did wrong in this tweet is the tweet's too long. So you can see that by the fact that it's indicated the red highlighting over the last two letters. And you can also see at the bottom by the tweet button that I have a -2 in red. That's telling me your tweet's too long, you need to decrease it by 2 characters. The other thing that I did wrong, which I see happen all the time, is I used the wrong handle for living beyond breast cancer. So I made the assumption that, I refer to it as LBBC, so of course that should be their handle. But in fact, at Living Beyond BC is the correct handle. So this is just to kind of point out, don't assume that you know what an organization's or person's handle is, because they could have something different. For example, my handle is not at Monica Bryant. So if you're unsure, look it up, and you can look it up using that search tool. Now, you can even take it one step further and engage in some direct legislative advocacy by tweeting at your elected official. So this is a way to publicly ask your elected official for something. So here I've tagged my personal member of Congress, Representative Mike Quigley, and I'm asking him to support at Debbie Wasserman Schultz's bill. So I've now tagged both members of Congress. I've included the bill number here, which is always a good thing to do with legislative advocacy because there's sometimes lots of bills on a particular topic like breast cancer. So if you're talking about a specific piece of legislation, using the bill number is always a good way to kind of keep people on track. And I found this bill number through that original change.org link that LBBC sent out. I used the same 2 hashtags again, so hashtag breast cancer, hashtag stop the guidelines, and this time I have correctly CC'd the original source, which is at Living Beyond BC, and I've included the link again. Now the only issue with this tweet is that it's a little bit confusing. So we're saying support this bill changing breast cancer guidelines. So are we saying that we want the guidelines changed or that we don't want to change? It's a little iffy. So after 3 revisions, this is what I've ended up with, and I'm ready to tweet now. I've tagged both members of Congress, I've included the bill number, I've used the same hashtags, I've included the correct handle for my original source, I've included the link, and I even have 1 character left to spare. So I hope that kind of illustrated a couple of different ways that you can engage in advocacy just based on somebody else's tweet. So we're not saying that to be a good advocate on Twitter, you have to come up with your own content necessarily. And some things that you should be on the lookout for. Now, I just want to spend the last couple of minutes talking about online footprint and privacy issues. So thinking about somebody's online footprint is really important. As Josh mentioned, a good rule of thumb is if you don't want the information on the front page of the New York or LA Times, don't put it on Facebook or Twitter. Now, I'm certainly not suggesting that people should be ashamed of their diagnosis or keep their diagnosis private if that doesn't feel right to them. But too often we hear stories from people who didn't really think through the ramifications of disclosing all of this information online and are now in a position where they've disclosed it and are having problems. So even if you're quote unquote out about your cancer diagnosis, it doesn't mean that you're going to want every detail out there on social media. And because that can have an impact on your jobs, on your social life, in a lot of different ways. So we know that employers often Google potential employees. And for a lot of people, the first couple of hits on Google that come up are their Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, et cetera, accounts. And so if you are doing nothing but tweeting about your cancer experience and how horrible your previous boss was, that could be a red flag for some potential employers. Also, it can affect your social life. So we had a woman contact us once who had given an interview to her local newspaper about her diagnosis and her fertility preservation treatments. This was long before Twitter. And now the newspaper's online and is tweeting old stories to kind of just beef up their Twitter account. So now everybody that goes on a date with her now knows about her fertility status, and it becomes a topic of conversation on a first date. And that's not necessarily something that everybody wants. Now, obviously, she couldn't have seen into the future about, Twitter being created. But again, we're just sort of trying to make the point that before you post things, before you put things out there, think it through. And it's also important, if you're keeping some of the details of your diagnosis confidential, that you let your friends and family know about that. So if they're tagging you saying, at Now Survivorship, so glad you were with me, I was with you for your last chemo treatment, well, they've sort of outed you whether you wanted that to happen or not. So again, it's worth having a conversation with your friends and family about sort of how you feel about putting this information out on social media. And then also think about the long-term impact. So we know a lot of people, especially young adults, who are all about sharing and want to put their information out there, and that is fantastic. But what we urge them to do is to think about, again, the long-term impact. So yes, we want this information to be out there now, but is it something that you want to be out there 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now? And again, your answer might be absolutely, why wouldn't I want it to be out? We're just urging that you think through that and make an educated decision. Now, if you want to keep some privacy, but still engage in advocacy on Twitter, there is a way to do that. So one way is to make your account private. And this is where you manually have to approve all the followers before they can see your tweets. And that might be great, but it does sort of limit the impact that your tweets have and make the account kind of more like Facebook versus Twitter. So it's not always the best way if you want to be a really effective advocate, but it is an option. Another option is to tweet under a pseudonym. So at Called the Perfect Moms is a good example where her name isn't necessarily attached to the account. And so you could have a pseudonym out there and be tweeting, at Breast Cancer Advocate, and not necessarily have your actual name or picture associated with the account. You're still an effective advocate, but you're keeping your identity private. And then if you are already on Twitter and you have your username and your pictures out there and you're already tweeting, but you're not quite sure you want to be sort of very public about your diagnosis or your cancer status, you can still tweet about issues, but by keeping the message general. So you could say support #breast cancer research by donating to @LivingBeyondBC with a link to LBBC's donate page. Now that's something that anybody could tweet, even if they've never been diagnosed with cancer. So I am not a survivor myself, and yet many of my tweets are cancer related because of my profession. So that's very different than saying I'm a survivor, I support LBBC, and I hope you do too. So again, just kind of thinking about different ways to phrase things could be as simple as keeping your privacy. And then finally, if you are linked to an organization or a workplace and you want to make it clear that you're tweeting on your own and not for an organization, you can always include a disclaimer in your profile, that little blurb about yourself under your username that Josh showed us. And you could say something like, all opinions expressed are my own, or retweets and likes don't equal endorsements. I mean, these are very sort of formal things to do. And if you are just kind of tweeting on your own and being an advocate on your own, you don't really have to worry about these. We would say if our volunteers are tweeting for us, that they would add something like that, just to make sure that it's not confusing as to what's coming specifically from Triage Cancer. Now, there has been a slightly disturbing trend over the last couple of years where we saw employers and some universities asking employees and potential employees and students for their private social media passwords so they can see what was going on behind the scenes. And that was really quite concerning to many advocates. And thankfully, states stepped up and passed laws limiting the ability of employers and schools to do this. And so this is where we stand right now. And as you can see, as the years have gone on, more and more states have stepped up to the plate to address this issue. But it is important to know if you're applying for a job and you're asked for this information, what's going on in your state and if your state has a law protecting you against that. So at the end of this presentation here, we just included some resources for you, a great Twitter how-to, the list of congressional handles that I mentioned earlier, and then LBDC has a great handout about how to participate in a Twitter chat, because they really are sort of fun and an easy way to be an advocate from the comfort of your own home. And so with that, I think we can take some questions in the chat box for the next couple of minutes. Just feel free to type in your question and we will respond to that. And as people are doing that, I did just want to mention, we being Living Beyond Breast Cancer and Triage Cancer, have multiple learning opportunities for additional information. So Triage Cancer hosts webinars, our educational blog, we have resources for free, and then of course, we'd love for you to follow us on social media and sign up for our newsletter. And this is how you can find both of our organizations and contact information. So we'll just give it a couple more minutes to see if anybody has any questions. And Josh, is there anything else you wanted to add?
I think that a lot of people are intimidated by Twitter. It's for some reason doesn't come as naturally as Facebook. But like anything, I think you just, practice. It's okay to make mistakes, to have, when you're tweeting, you learn from these things, as Monica showed, whether it's tagging the wrong username or using a wrong hashtag, or maybe, writing a sentence that, at the time, because you're trying to worry about the character count, makes sense. You realize, you look back and it may not have made sense to the people you were tweeting at. You have to be patient with yourself and really take the time to learn Twitter and practice it. You'll get better at it.
So we have a great question. Can you tweet at somebody who you are not following?
The question, yes, you can tweet at someone who you are not following. It gets tricky depending on privacy settings. I don't believe Twitter has changed this, but if you are private and you're tweeting at someone who has a public account or they're not following you, they're not going to be able to see that tweet. So again, that's something you're going to want to think about, when you're deciding on your privacy settings or whether or not you'll use an alias so you can stay public.
So we have another question about if you can delete a tweet.
You can delete a tweet. And again, that's the wonderful thing about when you type a tweet and, the next second you read it and realize you used the wrong hashtag or you used the wrong username. If you go to the bottom of the tweet, and I can show you this on the share screen right now real quick. So as long as it's your tweet, if you click on these three dots, the more, you have the option of copying a link to a tweet, embedding a tweet, like if you wanted to show it in a blog post, if you want to pin it to the top of your page, or you can delete it. So that's, yes, you can delete as long as it's your own tweet. And this will also, I believe, if you include a link or any video or any other content and someone retweets it, I believe it'll that information won't be accessible if someone has retweeted it. But again, if someone manually retweets, using RT or NT, that will stay on Twitter. So that's another thing to keep in mind.
And so one option too that I actually learned a little while ago is if you've made a mistake in a tweet and you want to correct that tweet, you can also tweet again the same, so let's say so here's a perfect example. I had put out a tweet where I used the wrong number about a law. And so what I just did is wrote corrected tweet in capital letters at the front of my tweet, and then use the correct number again. So it showed people that the content is still important, but pay attention to this tweet too, because I corrected a piece of information in there. So that's another little trick that some people use. So I think the message that Josh and I want to portray here is don't be afraid to make a mistake. It's a quick, fast-moving entity, and people do make mistakes, but there are ways to fix it. Any other questions? Okay, well, since we're already a few minutes past the hour, I'm going to just say thank you so much to everybody who joined us. And I know, speaking on behalf of LBC and Triage Cancer, we really appreciate all of your advocacy efforts. We hope that you will connect with us on Twitter and Facebook. And remember that as I end this webinar, you're going to be redirected to a survey. So please do take a few minutes to fill it out because we really do value your opinions. So thank you all so much and have a great rest of the day.
Yes, thank you all so much for your time, and we really hope this was helpful.